Good afternoon. I'm Kitty Beard, one of the founders of the Boykin Spaniel Society, and there were 8 of us in the beginning, but Allison Whit Boykin and Dr. Peter McCoy have died. So we have the remaining 5 founders sitting here today. Raise your hand when I call your name. Tilly Boykin and her husband, Dr. Baynard Boykin, and Edmund Hardy, better known as Beaver, and Henry Beard, my husband and 4th cousin. Right. I think the society was trying to send us a message, getting us together for this video. Methinks they want to record us for posterity before more of us start disappearing. First, Baynard Boykin will tell you about the origins of the breed and give a summary of the Boykin Spaniel and the Boykin community. Then I will speak to you about the overview of the Boykin Spaniel Society and our beginnings. One of the reasons the society asked us to get together today and record this video is that they get many, many questions from their members. And they're the same questions repeated over and over. So Dawn Kreitz, the executive secretary, has written up a list of questions for us to answer today. They felt like if we answered some of these repetitive questions, that it would save the office staff a lot of time. They also wanted to record for future generations our reasons for organizing the society and what we intended to achieve by doing it. After Baynard and I give you an overview of the dog and the society, all 5 of us will answer questions. Baynard?
Okay, thank you. You know, the origin of the Boykin Spaniel goes back great history. And I think it's incumbent upon our members of the society to have this background and why we did and what we did as a development of the Spaniel. Well, I'll try to do this as fast as I can. 1753, William Boykin came from Virginia to South Carolina and settled on what we call the banks of the floodplain of the Wateree River, which is about 5 or 6 miles as a crow flies from Camden, what is now Camden. Now, and fast forward, the Boykin community accumulated vast acres of land. There were there were only 4 members, boys, in that original settlement. But those boys, 2 of them in particular, Samuel Boykin and Burl Boykin, and Burl Boykin is my great-great-grandfather, had 17 children, so you can imagine how much that family grew. And they amassed land on the uplands and in the floodplains of the Wateree River. And not only amassed that, but they developed the agricultural purposes. They were agrarian people when they moved here. And of course, after all the game and all the nice hunters, they were all hunters too. And consequently, the Boykin community accumulated thousands of acres of land between Town Creek and on the other side of Swift Creek, which is the lower end of Kershaw County. Then I'm going to fast forward to Whit Boykin. Whit Boykin, who is my grandfather, was the one who was instrumental in getting this dog started. He had a farm. He was born in 1862, but he inherited a farm called Pine Grove Plantation, which is right near the Boykin Mill Pond. And he enjoyed not only farming, but he enjoyed the sportsmanship and hunting in the area. He had a great friend from Rock Hill, South Carolina, who accompanied him on a lot of these earlier hunts. They had to go down the river with what we call john boats, 14 to 15 feet long, and it would take 2 people and a dog or 2. And they would shoot ducks as they come out of the willow shoals. The inboard power was a paddler. So it was very quiet. So consequently, if they had the bird dogs, which was also part of their group for the hunting purposes, those dogs would move around in the boat, and when the ducks jump up, the dogs get excited and they would move and rock the boat, and consequently, it got determined that they rocked the boat too much. They were too big, so that was a problem for them. So old man Elliot White from Spartanburg saw this little church at the Presbyterian church, and the little dog followed him into church. So he then said, well, I'll take that dog back outside, and sat him down. When he came out, the dog was waiting. And he sent a message to my grandfather, Whitboykin, saying, I think a dog of this type would solve our problem, because he was the little brown dog that wouldn't rock the boat. And that was instrumental in them trying to get a dog of that type to and eliminate the bigger dogs which they were using. Well, the dog turned out to be very trainable, and he had good hunting abilities, good retrieving abilities, but they brought up a big problem. Where do we go from here? What do we breed to? There weren't anything of any type that looked like this little brown, solid brown dog. So they started thinking about it, and they said, well, in the early breeding, which this is about 1900 now that we're talking about. And in 1900, my father always told me the early dog that they bred was a Chesapeake Bay Retriever. And the Chesapeake Retriever was a solid brown dog with a sort of a tight, kinky hair. But they figured that he was bigger than what they wanted. So that what they decided was, well, we go ahead and breed that. My father says that they would breed to that particular dog because of the solid color. And by the way, geneticists know that this brown is a solid gene that is, but it's not a recessive, but dominant gene.
Dominant.
Sure, thank you. And therefore, they said, well, that'll help us to build the color, keep the color, or whatever we have to come up with. So then they decided, well, we'll get some smaller dogs and start breeding. And all of this was taking place during the 1910s and 1915s and 20s, and they started putting in spaniel breeding, spaniel dogs, like the English Field Spaniel. And I got some of them listed here. Of course, we all talk about the Chesapeake, and the Field Spaniel of the English, Cocker Spaniel, which was an American dog, and the Springer Spaniel, and an English Pointer was also in the crowd. Mm-hmm. And what they were always observing and trying to attribute, and what they wanted to get to eventually in this breeding program, that they would come up with years later with a brown dog that would have no variegations in color. And the 2 dogs that helped with keeping the color of the spaniel would be the Chesapeake and the American Water Spaniel. American Water Spaniel was introduced, and I remember that dog when my Uncle Bolivar Boykin bought it and brought it here from Wisconsin. He was solid brown, and he helped a lot in that gene pool to preserve the color.
Maynard, excuse me to say, let me ask you, I'd always heard somewhere along the line when they were trying to breed this first bitch, the first dog was a bitch, but
Yeah.
that somebody worked at the railroad and they borrowed a dog off of that was being shipped through. Is that any truth to that story? I'd always heard that.
I never heard.
Well, that's new. I've never
Okay,
heard that.
all right.
Yeah, well, that could happen easy
Yeah.
enough, because the hunters use the railroad track for transportation. But then later on, after 1940, some people locally introduced the Brittany Spaniel. Well, the Brittany always throw white toes. And the Chesapeake would also show amber eyes, which I like the dark brown eyes myself. But anyhow, that's what we started out with. And what they were trying to do was 3 or 4 things. Number one, they wanted to keep the brown color eventually. And they were going to breed for that. And they would throw out and discard if they couldn't, if something didn't look acceptable. And they finally ended up with, they wanted a dog that was being, that word that you use, Kitty, that's a family-oriented dog. Companionable hunting dog.
Right.
So they were getting that. They also wanted to have one that would retrieve, which the Spaniel did. They want a hunting dog, which would go out there and flush. And the Boykin Spaniels are good flushing dogs now. And consequently, and I talked about the American Water Spaniel. Did I say Cocker Spaniel? That's another one.
You did, I think.
And they want that comparable hunter companionship. They wanted a retriever and they wanted a hunting dog, which I call a flushing dog.
That wouldn't rock the boat.
But it wouldn't in small size.
Small size.
But now I personally, I'm pretty old. I personally knew that the Cocker Spaniel was put in there from the candies in the community, and also that they and I was very much knew Uncle Bala was American Water Spaniel, and they had a lot to contribute to the final product. But that all went on into the 40s, and consequently, I think Kitty, just a minute. Oh, Camden was a winter colony town. We had the northern people would come here and they would spend their winter 3 or 4 months at Camden. Not only to have for the horses, but also for all kinds of hunting. You had duck, quail, doves, and turkeys. My grandfather Whit was especially, he was an avid turkey hunter. That was his specialty. He liked that. And, but being a resort town, our northern friends would come down from the US 1 corridor and visit here, and they got to know the Boykins and their hunting grounds and so forth, and they would hunt various type of game. But they saw what this Boykin, the brown spaniel, was doing, and they liked it so much that they wanted to buy puppies, and they were selling them puppies, and those dogs got scattered on the US 1 corridor on the eastern seaboard, from Maine to Florida. So that was a help when we came to particularly trying to find, as you will go into, the gene pool we had to select with. So, and we had 667 foundation stock.
677.
600, and one of the breeding clubs says you had to have 100 foundations and 4 generations before they would accept it. So we used something like that, and I'll let you talk about that, Kitty. And I think that's the end of my general falling in spot, falling into place like a jigsaw puzzle that made the Boykin Spaniel get its name and trained in this area in Kershaw County.
Thank you, Banks. Um, in 1975, the South Carolina Wildlife magazine published an in-depth article about the Boykin Spaniel written by Mike Creel. Well, this caused some problems. All of a sudden, people realized they could make money off this breed, and they started breeding anything to a Boykin and selling it for a Boykin Spaniel. Well, Peter McCoy, who was our local veterinarian here in Camden, being a veterinarian, saw these dogs coming through his office. And he became alarmed for the breed. He felt like that the breed was going to be ruined. So he reached out to the Boykin family to get them to save the Boykin Spaniel. Peter was our chairman for many, many years, and he was the only founder that never owned a Boykin Spaniel. And I really attribute Peter for saving this breed. Had he not done what he did, then it would have been lost, without a doubt. The 8 founders of the Boykin Spaniel Society are Peter McCoy.
Picture right
Yeah,
above
yeah, there's a picture of us in our younger days. Right. Yeah, I can point them out. Let's see. There's Baynard and Whit, who are grandsons of Whit Boykin, and Henry Beard, who is a great-grandson, and Tilly Boykin and Alice Boykin, who were wives of Baynard and Whit. There's Dr. Peter McCoy. Henry Beard was the great-grandson of Whit Boykin, and Beaver Edmund Hardy was the great-great-nephew, and my great-grandmother was Whit Boykin's first cousin. I think I got everybody.
The man that developed the breed.
Yeah, Whit Boykin, who developed the breed, was my great-grandmother's first cousin. Right. Baynard and Henry Beard refer to Whit Boykin, who founded the breed, as Papa Whit. My family, I grew up with my family calling him Cousin Whit. And my grandmother loved Missy, Cousin Whit's wife. She thought the sun rose and set on him and on her, and she talked about her a good bit. So I always felt like I knew him, which I didn't. Beaver, what did your family call him?
I've never heard it.
You never heard him referred to. I guess being around here, you know, we all
I lived
kind
in
of-
Columbia a long way away.
Right. So, anyway, Baynard, Whit, Henry and I grew up in Boykin. Tilly and Baynard owned and bred Boykin Spaniels, as did Allison Whit. Henry and I, both our families had Boykin Spaniels when we were children. As a matter of fact, Baynard's daddy Days gave us, I remember the Boykin Spaniel he gave us. And once Henry and I got married, we had Boykin Spaniels, and we actually bred a couple litters. Did you ever breed?
Yeah.
And Beaver Beaver hunted and owned Boykin Spaniels all your life, didn't you?
Right, yeah.
And you did breed?
Yeah, I had several of those.
Uh-huh, you bred several when we were all younger.
Yeah.
I think we bred our litters in the 80s or something. Anyway, Peter McCoy, after coming back to Camden and starting his veterinary practice, also lived in Boykin. The whole time he had the practice, he lived in Boykin. Beaver's great-grandparents lived in Boykin. His great-grandfather was Whit Boykin's brother. And his grandmother married somebody from Columbia, and that's when she moved to Columbia. But they always kept close ties to the Boykin community, even down to this generation. And because they knew there was good hunting over here. So.
Always ready for
And they
it.
always followed the hunting. So, anyway, we organized the Boykin Spaniel Society 40½ years ago in 1977. At that time, Beaver, Henry, and myself were in our mid to late 30s, and Tilly and Baynard were in their early 50s. It's been a while. We met weekly for 2 or 3 years at Tilly and Baynard's house during the organizational period of this society, until we appointed a board of directors. During this organizational period, we registered the society with the state as a 501c7 organization. We wrote the Constitution and bylaws, etc. And one of the hardest things we did was set the breed standard. We got around 12 dogs that we felt were representative of the breed down at Tilly and Baynard's. We weighed them, we measured them, we described their traits before we wrote the breed standard. Tilly was a big help in this because she's an artist, and she was really good with detail, and that was real helpful. Some of the people that were helpful in the early years of the society was Dr. Eddie Durant, who was a dentist in Sumter, John and Ann Chappell from Leesburg, South Carolina, and Alec Beard, who's Henry's brother, and he's an attorney, and he helped us with all the legal, he volunteered his time to help us with all the legal ramifications that we ran into. The first office of the society was in Henry and my guest bedroom on a card table with a manual typewriter. We have come a long way, baby. That was a long time ago. Anyway, finally, we talked Henry into lending us an office in his place of business, which was Sportsman's Corner here in Dusty Bend. And we hired a part-time secretary because I had a full-time job as a school nurse with the Kershaw County School District. And the society was expanding so quickly that it was hard for me to keep up with the secretarial duties, plus write the 4 newsletters, which were the precursor of the magazine, every year. After 10 years, we were well established, and the founders began rotating off the board. Earlier, though, the Outdoor Life magazine wrote an article on the Boykin Spaniel, and this it got the whole nation interested in this breed, and so that really upped our membership and got the Boykin Spaniel nationally known, even though, like Baynard said, it was known on the East Coast, but not necessarily on the West Coast. Also during that time, in 1985, thanks to Beaver, who was our lobbyist in Columbia since he lived over there, he was responsible for getting the Boykin Spaniel named the South Carolina State Dog. That also brought us more attention. We also, after about 10 years, I guess, we hired an executive secretary to help take over the duties, hired her a full-time executive secretary to help shoulder the responsibility of the society, and we began rotating off of the board. We actually, all of us, Henry had never served on the board because what happened when we organized the board, we didn't go on as couples. We chose out of the couple who would go on, and it ended up being Baynard, Whit, and myself, and Tilly and Alice and Henry, and because I did the secretarial work, that's why I went on. But they didn't go on because we did not think that couples should be on the board. We just felt like that wasn't a good idea. I think, Baynard, you were the last one of us to rotate off the board, and that was in the 90s, until Beaver and Henry went back on about 3 or 4 years ago. And by a stroke of luck, Dawn Kreitz ended up as executive secretary and has carried the society to new heights because of her and her husband Bill's love for the breed. Since she took over in 2012, we have almost doubled our membership to 4,300 members. We now have over 34,000 registered dogs, and we have over 11,000 registered litters. Anybody want to add anything? Have I left out anything?
I think you got, how many litters do we usually have per year? Do you have any idea about that?
About 500 litters.
500 litters a
Yeah. All I know is this Christmas, Dawn and Bill went out of town, and they weren't here for the week of Christmas.
Yeah.
The board let her off, and they came back and they had 20 litters waiting on them.
Come on. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, now we come to the questions that the society has given us to answer, and this will give you more information about the society. And I'm going to read the questions, and unfortunately I have to answer the first two. Do the founders of the Boykin Spaniel Society want the Boykin Registry merging with the American Kennel Club? How do the founders feel about the Boykin Spaniel being AKC registered? Well, when we first began, we definitely do not want to merge our registry with any kennel club. But when we first began, we did look into the American Kennel Club and the American Field Club and what direction should we take to get recognized. We decided to go with what the American Field recommended, which was $100 of foundation stock, select $100 of foundation stock, and have 4 generations of progeny, and then we could apply for recognition. Well, during that time, we ended up with 677 foundation stock dogs. And during that time, we decided we did not want to go with the American Kennel Club because they had a reputation, valid or not, for ruining hunting breeds through either field trialing or bench shows or both. So that ended up being a problem. And by the time we got 4 generations of our 677 foundation stock dogs, we had decided we didn't want to turn our registry over to anybody because we felt that nobody would develop this breed like the family wanted it developed, that only we could do it. So we decided to keep it, and I'm glad we did. Many years later, a few disgruntled members decided to approach the AKC to see if they'd register Boykin Spaniels. Well, by that time, the United Kennel Club was registering Boykin Spaniels. We were a well-recognized breed. So the American Kennel Club was glad to take us on. And what they would do is they would accept any Boykin Spaniel that was Boykin Spaniel Society registered. But then any progeny from that dog could be AKC registered without having to be BSS registered. So they would take anything after that. And we do prefer that the Boykin Spaniel not be recognized by the AKC, but there's really nothing we can do about it because the AKC recognizes all dog breeds that are recognizable, of which we are now. Okay, question number 2. Do the founders want the Boykin to be bench show dogs? An AKC judge commented to a Boykin Spaniel Society member, there is too much discrepancy in the breed and they are very hard to judge. Wouldn't bench shows help eliminate this? Owners who are mostly not hunters are the ones that are interested in bench shows. The society decided way in the beginning that we would not breed for conformation. We did not want anything to interfere with the hunting ability of the dog. We felt like that breeding for conformation might take away from the hunting ability. We chose hunting ability over looks, and I think that was a wise decision.
Didn't the AKC require us to have 2 or 3 bench shows a year? That was one of their.
I cannot
That
remember
was one
that.
of their requirements.
That was.
And that killed it as far as we were concerned.
Yeah, I don't know, I don't remember that, but that may have been the reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, your memory's better than mine on that. But I know we did decide not to do it. Anyway, we wanted to breed a companionable hunting dog, and the Boykin Spaniel has a different personality. It's just such an enthusiastic dog, it's such a natural hunter, that we didn't want to breed any of these qualities out. And we were afraid that if we bred for conformation, that this might happen. So we just decided not to. Also, now that the AKC is registering dogs, their standard is a little bit different from ours. They have a tighter standard for eyes and coat, and they will accept any amount of white. In the Boykin Spaniel Society, if the litter comes in and the puppy has too much white, we measure the white. Then they aren't registrable at the Boykin Spaniel Society, but it doesn't matter. With the AKC, they can be registered. Also, we are scared that the 2 separate dogs will one be an AKC show dog or a Boykin Spaniel Society hunting dog. But there's nothing we can do about that. We're just hoping that they don't become popular bench dogs. As a matter of fact, they've been showing up at the Westminster Dog Show, and I don't think there's a breed in the United States that is disappointed except us, because their dog is in the Westminster Dog Show. They all get excited, and everybody calls me up, oh, guess what, I saw a Boykin in the, and I say, oh no. So anyway, there is a growing interest in bench trials, but it hadn't gotten really big yet. But we hope and we try to encourage them to keep the hunting traits along with the bench trials. Okay, do the founders want to remove the white restriction for registration? Why was white allowed at all if the intent was a solid brown dog?
Now I would like to talk about that. You know, that has been one of our bigger problems. Due to the gene pool of the dogs that we talked about early in the development, naturally you have a lot of white, and I can sympathize with these folks because the gene pool had that in it. We tried to breed it out by first crossbreeding and then backbreeding and then crossbreeding, and brown has a distinctive, to me, use. Number one, if you got to have a dog in a blind, and if you're hunting turkeys in particular, you want a dog that doesn't have any white on it, because a turkey got a keen eye and he can see that dog's gonna be excited seeing that turkey out through the blind brush. And I think it's a good factor to have that dark color. So we kept trying to do that. And says, what?
Man, wasn't one of the reasons that they docked the tail was because in a turkey blind they didn't want it to rattle in the leaves and that?
If you had, my dad always put that, we had dock-tailed Boykins.
Yeah.
But in the blind, he'd always move the leaves around where that dog was gonna sit.
Taking no chance on that.
So if you
Yeah,
wag
take a chance.
that dark tail, it wouldn't.
A turkey is a wise fella. He's smart. So anything can spook him. And then we came down to the point, which is, I think somebody's going to talk about that, is if the white is there, it's got to be a small, measurable, and we had guidelines for measuring, And, but you know what? I was on that committee that people were able to bring their dog or puppy to see whether it was acceptable white or not. One fella from Sumter had a dog, and he brought it. It wasn't one that we bred, but he brought it to me because I was on that committee, and I looked at it. She had about 3 white hairs. He said, "Well, you're the last member of this committee that I've been to," and said all the rest of them turned it down.
Well, you were chairman.
No, I was at that time. I think I was on a committee. It might have been.
You were
chairman.
chairman of the registry committee.
Yeah, okay. And he looked at Tilly. I said, "Tilly, what do you think?" He said, "Oh, there's nothing to that." I said, "There's nothing. It might even drop out when he gets older." He said, "Would you like to have that puppy?" She says, "Oh, no, no." And that puppy reached up and kissed her in the face and said, "You know, I think I will keep it." And she was a good hunter. And that was Maggie. And that's the last boy in Spaniel we have owned.
Really?
Yeah. So I just thought I'd inject that thought. And also Eddie Durant told us this: you will either have a show dog or a meat dog. You keep this field trialing, you're going to end up with a dog that's not going to be worthy for hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned his name.
Yeah.
And I answered your question, I think.
It's all right.
Yeah. So,
Well,
if anybody has another question.
well, I want to interject this about the white. According to what Don calculated, in 1981, 74% of the dogs didn't have a problem with white, but 26% were rejected because of the white. By 2017, 91% of the dogs were acceptable, had either no white or acceptable white, and only 9% of the dogs were rejected for too much white. So that is real progress between 1981 and 2017. So, and you know, I think because of our gene pool, we could have said no white, but then our gene pool would have been a lot smaller, and I think that would have been bad for the breed. I think that it was a trade-off.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that it was good that we had as many dogs in the foundation stock, and we did not reject dogs with white, because we would have rejected a lot of good hunting. And it shows that we have gradually declined the white and probably saved a lot of the hunting ability too. So, number 4, how do the founders feel about changing or simplifying the current method of measuring whites on the puppies in the litter application?
I think that we don't see any reason to make a change on that. Some people come up and say, well, how about nothing larger than a dime? But that, you know, puppies range in size, you know, a few ounces can make a big difference. And a runt, that's a big white on his chest. So I think we ought to leave it the way it is, and that's what
I agree with you.
We have measurements for the white.
Right.
Right.
Well, they want to change it though.
Yeah, but I
they-
think measurements are better.
I think so too. There's no
Could be
way.
long, thin one, or
Yeah.
could be a spatzy
White
one.
might be a white,
Yeah,
horizontal.
horizontal one. It's hard to say that,
Yeah,
something
I
like
think the measurement's the best way to go.
Yeah.
Just like we've been doing, there's no point in confusing
No point in
everybody.
changing.
Okay, this is a long question, but anyway, it gets the point across. Do the founders want to allow a permanent Boykin Spaniel Society registration with a restriction on dogs with too much white to be Boykin Spaniel Society registered using a limited privilege or a permanent limited privilege? This would allow the dog to be Boykin Spaniel registered but never bred and also allow them to compete in Boykin Spaniel field trials. Explanation. Some people want to allow dogs with too much white to be registered with a limited privilege status, then at 2 years old, be examined again for white, and if the white meets the requirements, then be allowed regular registration. Some others want to allow a dog with too much white to be registered with the limited privilege, but it would be a permanent limited privilege, never to be lifted, but allows the dogs to compete in field trials. And others think if the requirement with too much white was proof of spaying and neutering these dogs, they could be given a permanent limited privilege and allowed to participate in field trials and hunt tests.
The answer, I think, to all of the above questions is an unequivocal no. Out of the over 4,000 dogs that we have registered in the last 40 years, there are hundreds of dogs over the years that have been turned down because of too much white and not allowed to compete. They're not allowed to be registered or to compete in the field trials. If we were to do this now, that would cause a lot of confusion, resentment, and possible lawsuits. So I think, it's just not good to change horses in the middle of the stream. Also, we don't want dogs with too much white being showcased in field trials, or bench shows, or hunt tests, leading people to think that this dog is a registrable dog when it's not. So I think that no, we don't want to have any way that a dog with too much white could compete.
Yeah, I think.
Just stick to what we've been doing.
Stick with what we've been doing.
Okay. All right, number 6. Do the founders want to remove the litter registration time limit? It is currently a year.
No, certainly not. A year, why would anybody need a year to register a dog? It's more than enough time to register a dog. And the puppies have to have their white spots measured when they're only 2 or 3 weeks old. That has to be done early. And to wait more than a year to finish registering is ridiculous. Not only that, but I'm suspicious. People say they want to keep their dog for a year to see how he turns out. Well, I'm suspicious that they just want the brown coat to grow out so it hides. Sorry, but honestly, I think that I am suspicious of people. They do things like that, and it's not fair to the people who want to do the right thing and measure the dog when it's young and register it while it's young. And how do you need more than a year? And I don't think that they should wait a year or over a year to let the dog grow up and see what he turns out to be like. That just gives them a chance to possibly sell the dog, which is solid brown, when it wasn't. And I'm suspicious.
I think most reputable breeders would breed their.
Yeah.
Would register their dogs before a year.
But there are always a few, want to get away with something.
But some of the puppies, we've had this to happen.
Yeah.
They take brown shoe polish and cover up the white.
Yeah, they do that too.
And then you see, and sometimes every people got an idea that, this dog didn't have white as a puppy, but now he is growing white.
Yeah.
And I've heard that expression going on, and they said, this dog not supposed to have any white, but it grew it.
Right.
I've never seen that.
Getting gray-headed early. Gray-chested early. Number 7. Do the founders want to allow non-Boykin Spaniel Society registered Boykins, such as AKC, United Kennel Club, or rescues, to be Boykin Spaniel registered with DNA testing to prove that they are Boykin Spaniels?
Absolutely not. The reason for the registry is to guarantee that every registered dog is descended from the foundation stock. Allowing this would erase the reason for the registry. And if we do that, we might as well just close the doors and go home.
Okay. Number 8, do the founders want to expand the suggested health testing or keep it a certain number, rotating new tests on as we remove old tests? No. Knowledge in genetics is exploding, and it's going to continue to do that. This would be better left to the Boykin Spaniel Foundation. They have educated themselves in genetics, and they keep up with the changes going on. And I don't think that the founders need to make this decision. We just are not, we're not up on this. And I think this is an ever-changing thing, and it's going to continue to be, and I think it should be left up to the foundation.
I have a question. Do we have a limit on what tests, and when you say they rotate off some of them?
Well, we do certain tests now. And what they're talking about, say that we test for coliac or something like that, and all the dog, everybody gets fine. I mean, we breed that out of the, we don't have a problem with it anymore. Well, they're saying if we delete that test, should we add another test that we may be having problems with? We don't have a limit, and I don't think we should set a limit. I think it should be left up to the foundation to decide what we test for and what we don't test for. Does anybody?
I agree with you, but I just wanted to be sure I understood that there's not a limit to
No.
how many tests we can forward, because we do help the breeder, the person
Right.
who wants this dog tested. We help with the expenses of that.
Right, we do. We help with the expenses of the society, and the foundation helps with the
Yeah.
expenses of it.
Does the
No,
foundation have responsibility for that? Because the foundation came along
After
long after
what-
we were
yes,
involved in it,
yes,
so
right.
we didn't deal with that.
Yeah, they deal, that's one of the things, the main thing that they deal with.
And we
That came
started
along when
out-
Edmund Eatman was chairman, I think. The foundation, that came along then, in '96.
Well,
What
we
was the
did
name of
start
the fellow
there.
that suggested it? I can't remember.
Hip dysplasia is one of those. isn't
Yeah,
it?
hip dysplasia, we
They
definitely,
still do that.
that was the first one we started trying to encourage people to have their dog tested for hip dysplasia. So, anyway. All right, number 9. Do the founders want the Boykin Spaniel Society to focus more on field trials and titles to show hunting instinct? How do the founders feel about field trials versus hunt tests?
I'll take that one. A little bit of history about that. We had our first field trial shortly after we started, maybe 2 or 3 years after we got started. And it was primarily to get everybody together and know everybody, see a lot of Boykin Spaniels in one place and see what was going on, to meet the board of directors and all. And they had it, I had a piece of property in Elgin called Rice Pond, and that's where we had the first trial. And it was a lot of fun. I think
Yeah, it was an informal trial, and it was
very
like,
informal, or everybody wanted to win. That hadn't changed a bit. I thought I had an advantage, having a home court advantage, but it didn't work out that way. But anyway, that was the first one, and it was fun, and we redid it, and I think we did it for maybe 2 or 3 years.
oh, I think we kept on. I think
Yeah,
we did.
and it was a good time, but I think the consensus was that, and I think this is more when we just started developing more genetic information, is people want to breed to the champion. People who are raising dogs want to breed to a champion so they can get more for their puppies or get better puppies. I mean, that's what they're really trying to do, is get better puppies. And that hadn't necessarily proven true. And I think I'm trying to think of a term that they call it there, where you keep breeding to the same dog.
Popular sire.
Yeah, popular sire, and so I think that's been kind of disproved, and you can get a good dog from without that champion in there. And I think the general consensus, and this is more lately, I think, with us talking on it rather than when we started, because I don't think this was an option back there. Instead of having field trials, we want to have tests of the
Hunt
dogs.
test.
Hunting tests. And so that we know that a dog will retrieve in water and take a hand signal and do this kind of thing like that, and not necessarily have one of them be the best. All of us could have a dog that qualified for that. And I think that's our consensus. And then we
Yeah.
might have that maybe later.
Yeah, I think the hunt test, any dog can be a champion. They just
Yeah.
gotta meet certain criteria, and
That's
they go different levels, and then they finally reach.
He's not competing against other dogs, he's competing against a set of
Standards.
standards that he's supposed to do, but not against other dogs.
Yeah.
I might add that people, I was in there on that first go around, and I knew you were supposed to have the dog inside, and you're supposed to go throw, and the dummy's thrown out in the pond. And my dog, she did all that well, and she got that dummy. Instead of coming straight back to me, she was smart. She went to the bank over there and walked with that dog to the bank to me, and I said, man, that's a smart dog.
They made it there in a smart dog.
I believe Ned Beard, Henry's uncle, won that thing.
I think he did.
Won it. Banjo, was that the dog?
Yeah, that's-
I remember my dog, we put him up for, a long time before we had the thing. And when my turn came up, got up there and then threw one out there in the water, she jumped out there, started
Drinking the water.
I locked her up for too long before we did.
And you know, by the word of mouth, yeah, my father, as I told y'all earlier, was an avid turkey hunter.
Right.
Jonesboro, and what's that big river after you go through past Walterboro before you get to Edisto? Is that,
Edisto River.
huh?
Edisto River,
That's Edisto River, yeah. Okay, I didn't know for sure because there's a north and a south.
Right.
it's the southeast.
So there's a hunt club at Jonesboro that had gotten in touch with my father and wanted to come down, and they wanted to have a turkey hunt and bring his spaniel. So all this is going by the grapevine, you see. So Daddy went down, and I went with him on that particular hunt. It was in the winter, but anyhow, after that, wasn't too long before, I don't know how many of y'all know who Frank Hutton was. He had Prospect Hill Plantation over across the river, and he was a very rich man. He
This
made
was
his money.
Barbara Hutton's husband.
Barbara Hutton,
Hutton's
her
husband.
sister, daughter. Daughter is the daughter of Frank Hutton.
Oh, Barbara Hutton's the daughter of Frank
Daughter.
Hutton. Gotcha.
And he got hold of my father and asked him if he'd come down and demonstrate his turkey hunting abilities with his boy and spaniels. But his intention was to buy the dogs. And my father, when the hunt was over and all that, he talked to his wife and she said, Frank, are you gonna buy these dogs? Well, of course, my father overheard this conversation. So he was ready. And they asked him, and he says, listen, I'd be selling my family. I couldn't do that. And he says, I couldn't go back home to my children if I did that. But I will raise you 2 dogs that you can have, a male and a female. And so they won't be inbred. And I will have them named. One was named Pross, and the other one was named Hill. And he took them there, and Daddy says, you know what? Those dogs will stay in a kennel the rest of their life. And he was all upset.
Yeah,
And
I
he
could
didn't-
tell you a couple of real good stories about what happened to a couple of my dogs who were sent to a kennel and never let out. And I can tell you just a couple of good stories.
Well,
won't
I
go into
think
now.
that the
But anyway,
Boykins, all the family kept their dogs inside. They did not keep them in kennels.
but I-
And if you want a good Boykin Spaniel, you're gonna keep that dog as a companion because
do.
they really,
They will
they
not-
want to please
They do
and
not develop in a kennel.
they don't, and they won't turn out to be the kind of hunting
I
dog
know
you want
exactly what
if they,
happened to those dogs.
Right.
It's very upsetting.
mm-hmm.
Well, sorry, we might have
Yeah,
talked
well,
too
anyway,
much.
yeah, well, I talked too much, but anyway, let's go on.
We do believe in the founders and and our ancestors. We trained our own dogs, and we think that the professional trainer confuses a confuses the dog about who the master is, and you're not going to get as good a hunter as if you would if you trained your own dog. And Henry and I've trained our own dogs, and it takes only 5 or 10 minutes a day when they're real young, and on the weekends, as they get older, you can spend more time with them. Henry right now will take his dog to a professional trainer and say, I'm having trouble with this, and get them to show him techniques to help him work with the dog, with his dog. But as far as taking them to a trainer and leaving them, we don't do that. And of course, in this day and age, with people working 40+ hours a week, that's not always feasible, especially if you want to field trial your dog. And of course, none of us field trial our dogs, so that's not a problem for us. Do the founders want to see the standard size of the Boykin change? We're seeing some larger dogs now than before.
No. The dogs are already bigger than the original dog now. And the dogs that we have now probably rock the kind of boats they paddle down the river. They're already too big, I think, but they're bigger, and the most ones I see now would not be as small as the original dogs. And if people now want them bigger yet. And if you keep changing the dog, changing the size of the dog, changing the different characteristics of the dog, you're not going to have a Boykin Spaniel anymore. You're going to have a new dog. Why do we want a new dog? If you want a bigger dog, just buy a bigger dog. Leave the Boykin Spaniel be a Boykin Spaniel, and it was a small brown dog. So why would you want them to get bigger and bigger or change any other feature?
Well, I've heard that one reason that some, and these are not most of the owners, but some of these people who field trial their dogs, they'll go to general field trials and they want the dog to compete with lags.
Well, a small dog should not be competing with big dogs.
Right.
So,
That's that. Although some of our small dogs have beat these big dogs.
Some do. That's exactly what they want to show them.
Right.
Well, let them show them that, but
Right.
don't complain because you want a bigger dog so he can compete with the bigger dogs.
Right. I agree
The
with
size does not stop them from
That's-
being registered.
Exactly.
That has nothing to do with it. You're
That's right.
But-
And Baylor, I think you were telling me
Yeah.
earlier about
So,
a little
yeah.
that had 2 different sized dogs coming out of that same little. One of them was huge and one of them was.
Yeah, Henry was telling you about that.
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
Well,
they were
yeah.
same
Weighed 57 pounds or something.
Yeah, male, female weighed
32.
32 or 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's.
But anyway, I think the
Change
dog.
the size of the
Yeah.
dog, they're gonna start wanting to change other features and things like that. And just let the dog be what he is.
Right. Okay, number 11. Do the founders want to see the society move out of Camden, South Carolina?
No, and that's another thing. Why would you do that? Everything is here. We've got the place here where the dog was started. We've got people can come here and look around Camden and look around the country where the dog was started. Boykin, then you can see the house where the original Boykin was. Is
Brilliant.
still there.
Mhm.
The Boykin has been made the state dog. It's, we've got the archives, we've got the society is here. This is the obvious place to have it. And if you put it someplace like, where do you want it? Out in the Midwest somewhere where it's more convenient for some member of the chairman or somebody or in the society. But there's, when you think about it, no business or no corporation or business does that. They have their home base. And wherever it is, they have their home base, and that's where everything is. And if you want to be chairman of that corporation, you go to them, they don't come to you.
That's a good answer, Tilly. I think you hit the nail on the head.
That's right. So I don't see any point in putting it somewhere else where it's more convenient for the chairman, because I happen to be in California. Or
Well, I think
well, anyway, out west somewhere, it's more convenient for them to have it there. They better come here. We don't go to them.
Well, I'll tell you, I think that if they ever moved it out of Camden, they'd have all of us rolling over in our graves.
Unless they moved it to Boykin.
Right, exactly.
Me and Kershaw down here.
That's right. That's right. Well, the chamber,
Yeah,
really
they're
supports. They put up the billboards. I mean,
Yeah.
they put us
We
on the
have
cover of their
everything. Everything is
magazine.
here.
The archives has got a display. I think it's all here.
This
So
is
I
the
think
home. This is the
right.
home base.
Now, the nationals, the National Field Trial we've had here the last few years, which has turned out to be a great success because people come from all over the country. They get to go to the archives and look at the exhibit there.
yeah.
They get to come to the office here and look at the office. They get to go to Boykin for the oyster roast and they see Boykin where the dog was developed. But if for some reason they decided that they needed to move the nationals, they need to look at the pros and cons, and if the pros outweigh the cons, then it should be maybe.
Well, they
if
could
they've
move the
got rid-
national. But
Yeah.
the thing about, and then also I wanted to point out that Camden is going all gung ho about having tourists
Right.
here. Tourists here, and you'll have more and more people coming to Camden, and they will see a lot of things about Camden and probably the Boykin Spaniel, and it's good for us to be here.
Right.
So
right.
why would we want to move?
Yeah, we wouldn't want to move it, but there may be somebody in the future. That's why we're talking about
Well,
it.
that's right, there might be.
Right.
There might be.
And it's
But
not,
I don't think it would be right because this is the home base.
Right. Exactly. And the Boykin family's here, and they
Yeah,
will
well,
continue to be here, and they are a strong supporter of the.
not many of us left.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, no, there are a good many Boykins left. A lot of them don't have the Boykin name like me, but I'm a Boykin descendant.
And the Wild Turkey Federation for the nation is in Edgefield, South Carolina.
Right.
And it's a nice exhibit. Nice. I've been there once.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, I've got my grandfather with turkey yelper box with a lip on it and put a slate on it, and this slate has an arrow to tell you that it goes this way. And I never can find a difference.
Have you ever donated it to them?
No, but I'm thinking I got to do something with all those things,
All right.
Got to get rid of them. I don't want to just throw it in a trash bag. Get rid of it.
Number 12, do the founders want the Boykin Spaniel Society to go in the direction of an optional online registration? Because everything is going to computers, we're getting these questions. Why can't we register our Boykin online? Why can't we send in the application online?
Well, the answer is no, because the integrity of the registry depends on us having a hard copy in the office with a verifiable signature. And if the paperwork, over the years gets too much, there are specialty storage places that just store records and can retrieve them as you need them. Also, The information on the application is put into our computer for our records and also for statistical purposes. And also is stored on the cloud so that we have all of our records in two places. One is the original copy, hard copy, and the other is in the computer and in the cloud. So if something happens to one or the other, we still have our records down in the future.
Okay, 13, do the founders want to require health testing on the sire and dam in order for the litters to be registered with the Boykin Spaniel Society?
We don't think that's advisable. We want to encourage health testing through education. Also, the society has just started the Preferred Breeder Program, which requires health testing for them, among other things, for them to be a preferred breeder. And once they become a preferred breeder, they're the only ones that can advertise their litters through the society. So, only the preferred breeders can advertise their litters. And this program is just beginning. And we have a few preferred breeders that have sent in their information now. But one local breeder said, well, they thought they were going to have to now start health testing their dogs because that's the way they sold their dogs was through the website. And in order to be able to do that now, they were going to have to health test their dogs. So it's, I think it's doing what it's supposed to do, is encourage people to do that. And also, once breeders become more knowledgeable about genetics, realizing that we need their carriers, and also there's no reason to eliminate their affected dogs, they will be more willing to help test their dogs. A lot of people think now that if they have a carrier, oh, I can't breed my dog. Or if they have an affected dog, they think, well, I can't breed this dog. Well, if they breed to a clear dog, then they can do that. So I think with education, the health testing is going to, be the way to go.
How do the founders feel about Boykin Spaniel today compared to the Boykin Spaniel in 1977?
Well, I think it's a better dog.
It's definitely better.
Definitely a better dog. I think that they're more alike
More alike, yes.
than they used to be
Much
when we
more.
first started, and certainly less white
Yeah, that
on the
too.
dogs. So I think that all of the efforts that we started have paid off and are paying off, and the preceding boards after us have followed up on what we're trying to do to begin with. And so I think that all of our efforts and the efforts that
Came after.
came after us has done what we set out to do.
I remember one of our first meetings when all of us brought our Boykin Spaniels to the meeting, except Peter, who didn't have one.
Right.
And everybody had the perfect Boykin Spaniel. Quite a bit of difference in there. And now they're more standardized now than they were back
Well,
then.
everybody still thinks they have the perfect.
You're right. You're right. You don't get in the way of a Boykin and his dog. Okay, do the founders have any additional concerns that are not listed above? Well, if nobody else does, I do.
Well, go ahead, what is it?
Okay, I feel like some of the breeders are not reading the standards, and some of the members are not reading the standards. One thing is about dock tails. We have a standard for dock tails. They say to cut off 1/3 of the tail of the dog so that at adulthood they'll have a 2.5 to 3 inch tail. Okay, they are they're taking their dogs to the veterinarian, and the veterinarians are docking these tails, and some of them at adult are 4 to 5 inches, like the Field Springer Spaniel. They have longer docked tails, and I don't think that all the breeders realize that there's a way, when they go to the vet, they should say, all right, now I want a third of this tail cut off, blah, blah, blah. So, and then also, I don't think people realize that the Boykin should have a flat, smooth forehead. The hair should be short and smooth on the forehead. We had somebody tell us one day, Henry and I was someplace
At the field trial.
at the field trial, said, well, I thought that was part of their personality, and if you cut that off, then they lost their personality.
That was a tuft on top of his head.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
tuft on the top, you know, the little top knot kind of thing.
I think a lot of that came from the American water spout.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think so
probably.
too. And if I had a good dog and it had that, and it had everything I wanted, I would not breed that dog. But what I might do is breed it to a dog that maybe had a smooth head, so I'd start getting some smooth
We
puppies.
use some scissors.
You can always
You
use
can solve that problem pretty quick.
That's easier than putting brown shoe polish on the blaze. You're right. Anyway, I think another thing, it's important to keep the board balanced. And I was looking at the board the other day, and we have a real balanced board now. We mainly have hunters who keep their dogs in the house, that treat their dog like a member of the family. And so I think it's looking good, but I think that the balance board, I think, is good, except we don't have enough females, and I always stand up for the women. And right now, we only have 2 women on the board, and I think we need more women. But anyway, that being said. You too, baby. We do have mainly hunters who train their own dogs and hunt test their dogs, but I think we need to always have maybe a professional breeder on that board. We need a professional, somebody who field trials, and somebody maybe that hunt tests or field trials and hunt tests. I think we need a Boykin descendant on the board, and I think we need a family pet owner on the board. I think we should get a representation. Less than 1% of our members field trial their dogs. So we need to reach out and find, we don't need just to have breeders and field trials on the board. We need to have a balance and get other people on the board.
You started out with a veterinarian on the board, and I think we've got one.
We
now.
do have a
I
vet.
think that's all very helpful. having a
I do
veterinarian
too.
on
I
the
think
board.
having a veterinarian is really,
Required, but it's certainly helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he has
we-
some good ideas.
and we had a veterinarian on the board to
Yeah.
begin with, you're right.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything?
No,
Okay.
I think you did a very good job.
Excellent.
Ms.
Never
Beers.
forget.
Thank you.